The platform, as you know, is dedicated to disseminate the grains of the ancient Indian wisdom upheld by Swami Vivekananda. I am extremely blessed to introduce the speaker of today's session, Swami Atmapriyanandaji Maharaj, who needs no introduction in this scholarly world. It is our proud privilege to announce from this platform that the Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur, one of the premier institutions of the world, has conferred the honoris causa on our beloved and revered Maharaj for his significant contribution to the academic world. On behalf of all the students and the associates of this institute, I would like to express my heartiest compliment to him for his phenomenal achievement. We are really fortunate to undertake the adventure into the world of Upanishads under his august guidance. I request revered Maharaj to enlighten us with his discourse.
Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnad Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavasishyate. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad is part of Shukla Yajurveda and is the biggest Upanishad, apart from Chandogya Upanishad, which is also almost equally big. Chandogya Upanishad and Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, the two huge Upanishads among the 10 Upanishads on which Bhagavan Bhashyakara, the great commentator Shankaracharya, wrote his famous commentaries, are two aspects which are complementary to each other. The supreme reality, by whatever name called, is both transcendental and immanent. Transcendental and immanent. Immanent meaning that it is present in all beings as the innermost self, all pervading and universal. Transcendental meaning that is beyond time, space, and causation, beyond this relative universe. The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad emphasizes the transcendental aspect of reality, the Nirguna Brahman, as Shankara would call it, while the Chandogya Upanishad discusses in detail the immanent reality. Sarvam Khalvidam Brahma. All that you see in this world, all that is perceived, even in the relative world, is only that supreme reality called Brahman. Sarvam Khalu Idam Brahman. Khalu, well, indeed. Idam, all this. Sarvam is Brahman. Sarvam Khalu Idam Brahman. This is called the Gauna Mahavakya in the Chandogya Upanishad. In the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, it is Neti Neti Ityatma. The transcendental reality cannot be described as anything positive, because the moment you give a description of the transcendental reality, that description being clothed in words, phrases, speech, has to be in the relative plane, and that which is absolute cannot be spoken of in the relative plane. That is the problem. Therefore, the Upanishads often say it cannot be spoken about. Ashabdamasparasham arupam avyayam tatharasam nityam agandhavachayat anadjanantam mahatav param dhruvam nichayatan mrityumukhat pramuchyate. Kathopanishad says, Ashabdam, asparasham, arupam, avyayam. It cannot be spoken of by the word, it cannot be thought of by the mind, it cannot be seen by the eyes, it cannot be heard by the ears, it cannot be touched by the skin, and so on. So you can only describe it with negative phrases. Na iti, neti, neti. You can describe what Brahman is not, but you cannot describe what Brahman is. So the transcendental reality being indescribable in words, unthinkable by the mind, untouched by the organs, is described in negative terms in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, neti neti ityatma. So these two complement each other. The one is the iti, all that exists is just Brahman. Many Upanishads also speak about this. The Mundaka Upanishad says, Brahma evedam amritam purastad Brahma paschad Brahma dakshinatas chottarena adhaschordhvam cha prasritam Brahma evedam sarvamidam varishtham. Brahman is above, Brahman is below, Brahman is to the right, Brahman is to the left. And all that exists is Brahman. This is the iti, means this is Brahman. The neti, na iti is, this is not Brahman, this is not Brahman. You reject all that is relative as not Brahman. What is left behind? The irreducible, non-controvertible, absolute substratum of all relative existence is that Brahman. The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad takes this position. There is a wonderful discussion between Yajnavalkya and Janaka in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Almost the entire Upanishad is devoted to discussions among the rishis in the court of Yajnavalkya. Yajnavalkya was one of the greatest of rishis in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. He is the hero. And Janaka, the great king of Mithila, was extremely fascinated by the wisdom of the rishis, and he often used to organize symposia, seminars, discussions, interactions as we call them now, of course offline, not online. All the rishis used to assemble there in the court of Janaka. Swami Vivekananda therefore said, we moderns say that we don't have time to study these highest truths, but the kings, the monarchs, who had to rule a huge kingdom and do administration, had plenty of time to discuss divine truths, the Brahmavidya. Janaka was the forerunner. His court used to be constantly bustling with the sound of the chanting of the various shastras and the Upanishads. and groups of various Brahma Vidya Sampradaya, the tradition of Brahma Vidya, each school being led by a particular rishi used to assemble. Just like in a huge physics congress, for example, the Solvay Congress was very famous, where there was a huge debate between Albert Einstein and Niels Bohr on the probabilistic interpretation of quantum mechanics. So giant minds join together and discuss. And this discussion takes you to such great depths of understanding and is so illuminating both in terms of extensity and intensity. And Janaka used to organize this. He was a sponsor, and fabulously he used to gift these various rishis and the schools because they had to maintain the Gurukula. The entire country, great Bharata Varsha, immortal tradition of millennia of cultivation of higher knowledge, was vibrating, as it were, with the sound of Veda Ghoshana, the Upanishads and the Vedas, and constant discussion of the highest truth. Swami Vivekananda said famously, that shows that India was so rich, so prosperous, there was no material problem to solve. The material problems were all solved, so much of water and wealth and natural resources were available, and the kings ruled the country with so much of wisdom and justice. The subjects were so intensely happy, and they spent their time in cultivating higher knowledge. Swamiji said that Bharatavarsha should come back again. I used to imagine the Parliament of India and the assemblies of the various states will discuss these higher truths. The parliamentary session is about to begin, and 1 full week is devoted to the discussion of the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads and the various religious scriptures in the world, the Bible, the Quran, the Sikh scriptures, Guru Granth Sahib, and so on. An entire parliament is deeply engrossed in cultivating higher knowledge. When will that day come? It will come when India becomes prosperous, rich, and the power of purity is manifest. The purity of mind and the purity of spirit. So Yajnavalkya was a rishi who often used to go to Janaka. He is a very interesting kind of a rishi. You should remember, the rishis were not sannyasis. The concept of sannyasa came much later, and organized sannyasa. In the ancient Hindu religion, the Sanatana Dharma, the we read in the Upanishads, we have the sampradaya of the various ascetics, Paramahamsa Parivrajakacharyas, peripatetic monks who constantly used to roam around cultivating Brahma Vidya and propagating this Brahma Vidya to hundreds of people wherever they went. You should remember that hundreds of thousands of these illumined souls were walking over the length and breadth of India, staying for just 2 or 3 days in a place, living on alms with the barest minimum, and imparting this Brahma Vidya, the highest knowledge, to all the common folk. That's why in India the spiritual roots are so deep. If you want to learn about the highest truths, go to the villages. Even now, the so-called illiterate and uneducated women in rural India, be it Tamil Nadu, be it Bengal, be it Gujarat, be it Maharashtra, go to any of these states, go to the interior villages who have not been polluted by the so-called modern knowledge. Ask them about Vedanta, ask them about the scriptures, and they will give you insights into scriptures. Swamiji mentioned this. When Swami Vivekananda was in Kerala, sitting under a tree, he saw some women collecting water from the pond. Seeing a sadhu, they started conversing fluently in Sanskrit. Swami is just amazed. Even now that culture is there. So these rishis were married people. Among the sannyasi sampradaya, there was no organization. Freelancers among sannyasis called avadutas, turiyatitas, kutichakas and bahuchakas, paramahamsas, parivrajakacharyas. So all of them freely used to move around, and the various Upanishads, they called the Sannyasa Upanishads, 17 of them, they're all recorded. Among the 108 Upanishads available, Sannyasa Upanishads form a part, 17 Upanishads, describing in detail the code of conduct, the way of life, and the wisdom of these various mendicant monks. Organized sannyasa perhaps came after Buddha, and Swami Vivekananda borrowed heavily from the previous traditions of Buddhism and Christianity perhaps, and the Darshanama Sampradaya, which was organized by Shankaracharya himself, and gave it a modern slant. Be that as it may, the point I was trying to emphasize was these great rishis were married people. They were conducting gurukulas with disciples, and no fees were charged because knowledge is too sacred to be charged. The knowledge which you are getting is so invaluable that you can't pay for education. Then who takes care of the expenses? The kings. Kings used to sponsor these various rishis, and the rishis, when they ran out of money, used to go to Janaka, was a great sponsor. Several kings were great sponsors. Janaka was the greatest sponsor among them. In fact, there's a funny statement in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. There's one king to whom a rishi went and said, "Sir, I want to discuss Brahman, in lieu of which I'll take some funds for my Gurukula." And the funds were cows. In those days, cow was a great wealth. So you will find in the Yagyavalkya Janaka Samvada debate, Sahasram Dadami, I'll give you 1,000 cows for the piece of wisdom that you have given me. Because knowledge was considered so sacred, so valuable, and no amount of compensation is possible for knowledge. Repeatedly, Janaka will say, "Oh, Yagyavalkya, I am so overwhelmed by the way you gave me this special insight into Brahma Vidya, and I will give 1,000 cows for this. Come on, teach me further," and go so on. So this one rishi went to a king and said, "I'm going to discuss Brahman with you." That king was so pleased. "Oh, you have come to me saying that you will discuss Brahman? For that one statement, I'll give you 1,000 cows right away." People are running behind Janaka. Janaka, Janaka iti jana dhavanti. Everybody is saying, Janaka, am I not also equally interested in Brahma Charcha? You have come to me, so I will give you 1,000 cows right away. See, look at the competition. Look at the degeneration into which we have sunk now. The kings are competing who will be the greater promoter of Brahma Vidya and who will be acclaimed as a person who sponsors and promotes these Brahma Vidya Gurukulas. They were competing with one another. What a country, what a heritage, what a legacy. Even if you think about this, close your eyes and imagine that India, you feel transported, you feel proud that we come in that tradition. We are not ordinary people. Those of you who are listening to me now, remember you are the chosen people who have been privileged. Thanks to this great initiative, you have been privileged to hear these immortal words of the Upanishads, the Brahma Vidya Sampradaya to which we belong. Remember, all of us in India belong to the Brahma Vidya Sampradaya. It is not Hindus or Christians or Muslims and so on. We belong to a divine school in which cultivation of higher knowledge is the fundamental doctrine. Cultivate higher knowledge. Cultivate knowledge and higher knowledge. Paravidya and Aparavidya together. Kshetra Vidya and Kshetragya Vidya together. Science and religion together. Swami Vivekananda said he'll come back again. He said, science and religion shall meet and shake hands. Poetry and philosophy will become friends. And this will be the religion of the future. And if we can work it out, it will be for all peoples and for all times. So Yajnavalkya goes to Janaka. And Janaka said, I will not say anything now, I'll keep quiet. He remembers that Yajnavalkya has given him a boon once upon a time to ask any question to him at any time. Remembering that, Janaka asks a question, which is the beginning of this Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, 4th chapter, 3rd Brahmana. Brahmana means section. So 4.3 is the section which is called the Jyotir Brahmana. Jyotir Brahmana, Jyoti means divine light, light of consciousness, the supreme light. And Jyotir Brahmana is a section dealing with the light, the Jyoti of Brahman, Brahma Jyoti. 4th chapter, 3rd section is called Chaturtha Adhyaya and Tritiya Brahmana. So I will just chant the original because it's so sweet and elevating to listen to the original words of the Upanishads. The question that is asking, Yajnavalkya, what is the Jyoti, light by which man functions? Yajnavalkya kim jyotirayam purusha ityaditya jyotis samraditi hovacha adityena vayam jyotishaste palyayate karma kurate vipalyeti ityeva me vaitad Yajnavalkya. Yajnavalkya, what is the Jyoti? What is the light by which man functions? Then the answer, it is Aditya Jyoti. Common sense tells us, when the sun rises, everybody is very alert. Everybody goes about for his work. And the whole world is full of activity. So human beings, Jyotishaste palyayate karma kurute vipalyeti iti. Say they go about doing all their activities and they are busy with their functions. I rely on Swami Nikhilananda's translation. Those of you who want to have a quick idea of what the Upanishads contain, I recommend Swami Nikhilananda's masterly translation of the original in English, with copious notes in English based on Shankara's commentary. It has 4 volumes. Please do acquire these volumes and just read them like you would do a novel. When we were young, like mad, we used to read this book, just like you can go on reading like in a storybook. Quickly you will know what the Upanishads contain. Yagyavalkya, what serves as a light in man? The light of the sun, O emperor. With the sun as light, he sits, goes out, works and returns. Just so, Yagyavalkya. Then he's asking, when the sun is set, what is the light by which man functions? Astamita aditye Yagyavalkya kim jyoti revayam purusha iti chandrama evasya jyotir bhavati iti chandrama sevayam jyotishaste palyayate karma kurute vipalyeti ityeva me vaitad Yagyavalkya. The sun has set. What is the light by which man functions? He functions with Chandra Jyoti, although light is not very powerful, but reasonably you can function there. By this light, a man sits, goes out, works and returns. Then Janaka says, just so Yagyavalkya, you were right. Then asking the next question, what happens when the sun has set and the moon has set? Astamita aditye Yagyavalkya chandramasya kim jyoti revayam purusha ityagni revasya jyotir bhavati ityagne naivayam jyotishaste palyayate karma kurute vipalyeti ityeva me vaitad Yagyavalkya. When the sun is set and the moon is also set, what is the light by which man functions? Obvious answer that we are doing now, by the light of fire, Agni. Agni literally means fire. Anything which gives you light, even the tube light and the various electrical devices, also Agni, heat. Agni gives you heat and light. So when the sun is set and the moon is set, human beings function with Agni Jyoti. By the Jyoti, by the light of Agni, fire, a man sits, goes about, does his work and comes back. Just so, Yagyavalkya. Then, when the sun is set, the moon is set, fire is extinguished. What is the light by which man functions? You think about it yourself. What do we normally do? Suddenly there is a power cut. You're in the midst of a lecture, in the midst of a conference. It's dark everywhere. It is so dark you can't even see your own hand. Then you don't know how to exit. Where is the gate? Where is the exit? Then what do? Hey, who is there? I'm here. Be careful. I'm not moving now. Through the sound as light, man functions. So the Upanishad says, Yagyavalkya says, man functions with sound as his light, Vak. Astamita aditye Yagyavalkya chandramasya kim jyoti revayam purusha yitnagni revasya jyotir bhavati tyagni naivayam jyotishaste palyayate karma kurute vipalyeti ityeva me vaitad Yagyavalkya. Astamita aditye Yagyavalkya chandramasya shante kim jyoti revayam purusha iti vagevasya jyotir bhavati iti vachaivayam jyotishaste palyayate karma kurute vipalyeti iti tasmat vai samradapi yatra swappanir navinirgyayate tha yatra vagucharat utay upaiva Tavannet netitya mevai tadyagyavalkya. Vak acts as the light. By the power of vak, speech, you move about, do all your activity. Next comes the punchline, as we say, the acme of the Upanishadic teaching. When the sun has set and the moon has set, fire has been extinguished, and speech is hushed. What is the light by which man functions? Then Yajnavalkya says, he functions by Atma Jyoti, the light of the Atman within. And the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad will rationally, logically, scientifically prove that there is an inner light within you, which is a matter of daily experience by all peoples in all countries in all times. This is the beauty of the Upanishad. The Upanishad is not trying to build up a philosophy of the Atman. It is not a theology. It is not religion. It is just analyzing the daily experience of human beings and asking simple questions of a daily experience, investigating, questioning, and the profound answers that come out as a result of this inquiry is what we call the Upanishads. It's a documentation. That's why Vedanta is called a science. And the implementation of this Vedantic science is through technology, which is called yoga. So Brahma Vidya and Yoga Shastra complement each other. And the immortal text of the Bhagavad Gita is both Brahma Vidya and Yoga Shastra, as the colophon at the end of each chapter would testify. Om Tat Saditi Srimad Bhagavad Gita Su Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Sri Krishnarjuna Samvade Sankhya Yogo Nama Dritiyodhyaya Karma Yogo Nama Tritiyodhyaya, and so on. So here is this immortal text of the Bhagavad Gita. Om Tat Sat, Om, that existence, Tat Sat, Om, these are names of Brahman. Srimad Bhagavad Gita, which is elevated to the status of the Upanishad. Although it's a Smriti Shastra, it is elevated to the level of Shruti Upanishad. Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre. It is a science of Brahman, and it is also the technology of yoga. And it is a dialogue between God and man. An Nara Rishi, who represents humanity, and Narayana, who is the supreme divine being who imparts this knowledge to man. So this science of the Upanishadic teaching, which is Brahma Vidya, goes by inquiry, open-ended, fearless, bold inquiry based on observation and daily experience. Exactly what science does. Everything should be based on the facts of daily experience. You go by fact. You collect facts based on observation and investigate into them. That's why inquiry into Brahman Vidya will begin with saying, Athato. Now, therefore, Brahma Jigyasa. Now we are desiring to inquire into Brahman. In the case of yoga, for example, because of technology, it is not inquiry, it is a protocol. The ancient word for protocol is Anushasana. The Yoga Shastra begins by saying Atha Yoga Anushasanam. But in the case of Brahma Vidya, it is Brahma Jigyasa, inquiry. And therefore, he is asking, what is the light by which man functions? Atma Jyoti. Astamita aditye yagyavalkya chandramasya shante gno shantayam vachi kim jyoti revayam purushayatmatmaivasya jyotirbhavati ityatma naivayam jyotishaste palyayate karma kurute vipalyeti. The Atma Jyoti by which a man functions, man sits, goes out, works and returns. It's an assertion. Now Yajnavalkya is inquiring, what is this Atman that we are talking about? Katama Atmeti. Next question. Answer given is very profound, from which the Upanishadic teaching begins about the Atma Vidya. Remember, Brahma Vidya has to be realized, investigated into, and understood as Atma Vidya. We are not inquiring into the nature of God, nature of reality, but we are inquiring into the nature of our own self, Atman. Because you may not believe in an entity called God, but you have to believe in yourself. That's why Vedanta is a religion which can't be really discarded. You can't wish away Vedanta because it deals with your own self. Suppose you say, oh, I'm a scientist, I'm a rationalist. I believe in impeccable logic. I don't believe in anything which I have not seen. God, reality, supernatural things, I just don't subscribe to them. You may not believe in anything. And there are people who don't even believe something which they have not seen or understood or realized. A new planet has been discovered. Oh, is it so? I don't believe. I don't believe that exists. Oh, in a country there is some peculiar animal which exists. I don't believe it exists. I don't believe God exists. But do you believe you exist? No, I don't exist. I don't believe it. Who says it? I say I don't exist. If I say I don't exist, who is the I which says I don't exist? That I has to be denied. So that I which denies the existence of I has to be denied. And there should be another I to deny this. And that I has to be denied again. So it will lead to what is known as anavastha dosha in Indian logic and regress infinitum in Western logic. The series cannot end. And therefore, I can never assert I don't exist. You may say, I don't believe this exists and that exists, God exists. You may wish away everything. You may deny the existence of God. Can you deny the existence of your own self? Because the person who denies it is the self itself. Shankaracharya gives this argument in the Brahma Sutra Bhashya. Yayeva nirakarta taseva atmatvat. The person who is a nirakarta, the person who denies Brahman, denies the Atman, he is himself the Atman. How can you deny your own self? The denier is also the self. He who denies is also the self. And therefore, there is one undeniable, incontrovertible, undisputable, irreducible substratum called the Atman. And all of us have an understanding about the Atman. Everybody uses I. There is a survey done long ago by the American Psychological Association. What is the most often used word in the English language? And the answer is obvious: I. Every moment we constantly keep saying I. Shankara therefore says, in a sense, everybody is an Atmagya. Everybody is self-realized, but every one of us realizes himself or herself, without which we would not be using the word I. We constantly use this word I. So we are aware of the I, only we do not know the actual nature of this I. So Shankara says, in a sense, we are Atmagya, only we do not know the real essence or nature of what this I, Atman, is. And therefore, inquiry is necessary. Just like in material science, we know what is a table, we know what's a chair, all the material objects we know, but do we know the real composition, real nature? Science begins with inquiring about the nature of matter. What is matter? What does it consist of? What is the composition of matter, and so on. Then what is energy? What is force? So you want to inquire into the obvious things which you experience in daily life. Not that it is unknown to you, but known, but the nature is not fully known. Remember, science or religion of Vedanta is not an inquiry into the unknown. Many people derisively say, oh, I don't want to get into the mess of some Brahman and Brahman which is not known. It is known, very much known, only too well known to be able to assess the real nature of it. Who is so intimate with you than your own self? Suppose you say, after heavy lockdown, I have got some leave, I am going to the Himalayas, I am going to some place of scenic beauty. Are you taking somebody along with you, your companions, your wife and children? No, I am not taking anybody. I am going alone. Are you taking yourself? People will call you mad if you ask this question. Obviously, you can't go without yourself. So you are taking your own self, and you can never be separated from yourself even for a moment. You can be separated from your wife and children. You can be separated from your companions, from your knowledge, from your books. You can be separated from everything, but you can't be separated from your own self. Because that's you. So the I is the most intimate to me, and therefore it should be most beloved of me. Brihadaranyaka talks about it. Let us discuss it sometime. The priyatva, the dearness that you feel of any object, any human being. The wife loves the husband, not because of the husband, because of the self. The husband reciprocates the love, not because of the wife, but because of the self. Everything becomes beloved, dear to you, because of the self. And therefore, this self has to be inquired into by constantly listening to it, Shravana, reflecting upon its nature, Manana, Nididhyasana, constantly getting absorbed into this elevating divine thought. This is the Upanishad. It's just an open-ended inquiry and a challenge to humanity. The Upanishads have thrown a challenge to humanity. Come, inquire. Are you not ashamed? The Upanishad is asking that you are constantly living with somebody which is your own self and interacting in and through that entity which is your own self, which is the most intimate and most beloved, the dearest. Would you not like to know about his real nature? If you love somebody, you constantly try to think of that person, him or her, what he or she is, what is dressed, where she is now. You WhatsApp and you talk and you video call you make. Constantly are dwelling on that person, doting on that person. And who is nearer and dearer to you than your own self? So, is it not your responsibility and your commitment to inquire into what is the real nature of this I? This is the challenge of the Upanishad. A person who is not interested in the nature of this I is a psychological wreck. There is a serious psychological problem. You love somebody so deeply, but you don't need the urge to find out what is the nature of that person. Would you not do it? The Upanishad therefore says, come on, I have discovered the nature of the self. I will share it with you. Let us inquire together. So we are inquiring together now with Yajnavalkya, placing ourselves in the place of Janaka. Katama Atmeti. Oh Yajnavalkya, what is this Atman you are talking about? The sun is not there, and the moon is set, fire is extinguished, and the speech is hushed. What is the light by which man functions? He sits and moves about, works, and comes back. Jyotishaste, palyayate, karma gurute, vipalyediti. By Atma Jyoti. Oh Yajnavalkya, what is this Atman? Katama Atmeti. The answer, Yoyam Vijnanamaya Praneshu Hridyantarjyotif Purusha Sasamana Sannabhav Lokavana Sancharati Dhyayate Valilayateva Sahis Swapno Bhutvevam Lokamati Kramati Mrityo Rupani. A remarkable answer. Nikhilananda's translation. The self indeed serves as his light. What is the self? This Purusha, who is identified with the intellect, Vijnanamaya, and is amidst of the organ, the self-effulgent light, within the heart, which is a higher intelligence, the Dhi, Prajna, assuming the likeness of this Vijnana, it wanders between the two worlds. It thinks as it were and moves as it were. Being identified with the dreams, it transcends this waking world, which represents the forms of death, ignorance, and its effects. Straightforward explanation coming from the experience of Yajnavalkya. This is the self-effulgent light within the heart. Yoyam Vijnanamaya Praneshu Hridi Antarjyoti. This Hridi is a constant word which occurs in the Gita and the Upanishads. Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishto mattasmritir jnanam apohanam cha. The Bhagavan says, I live in the hearts of all beings. Ishvara sarva bhutanam hriddeshe arjuna tishtati. Hridaya, the heart, is a very, very special place. Hridi is the Saptami, sixth case of Hrid, which means heart. Hridaya, this heart is not the physical heart. The physical heart, Shankara will say, is Pundarika, Hrid Pundarika, Mamsapinda, the big bundle of flesh, which is in the form of Hrid Pundarika, the lotus of the heart. This is constantly used. So this has to be very deeply understood mystically, philosophically, and scientifically. Vedanta talks about three kinds of heart. The physical heart, which we know, we have a heart attack, go to cardiologist. The physical heart, which is tackled by a doctor, an expert in cardiology. Then you have the emotional heart. What is the emotional heart? The emotional heart is the seat of emotion, feelings. You cry, you weep, you rejoice, you love. All of them come from the heart. This heart is actually prana. The feelings and emotions that you feel actually are the pranic emotions coming from vital breath, forces, energies, emotions. And then there's a spiritual heart, which is called Hridaya. And the Vedanta uses the word Hrit Pundarika, Hridaya Akasha, Dahara Akasha, Hridaya Akasha. Akasha is space. Once again, Vedanta talks about three kinds of space. This is also very interesting. When I was talking in Houston, near the NASA, as you know, then I said, at that time, there's a craze, 2 years ago when I was in US, there's a craze for signing up for the space station. There's an announcement. After about 20, 25 years, human beings will send to space, and people who want to sign up can do so and sponsor this project. There's so much of craze everywhere. People are signing up. Then I said, what is the function of the Vedanta societies in USA started by Swami Vivekananda? We invite applications for signing up in exploration of the space within. The huge space within. This is the topic of discussion in this Jyotir Brahmana, which is the 4th chapter, 3rd Brahmana of the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Yagyavalkya Janaka Samvada. There's a huge space within. The physical space outside the Mahakasha. Then you have the space which is occupied by thoughts. Thoughts are also subtle objects. Just like physical objects span the physical space called the Mahakasha, thoughts which are mental objects span space called Chitta Akasha. Chitta means the mind. So Chitta Akasha. So you have the Mahakasha with physical objects, Chitta Akasha with subtle objects called thoughts, and beyond that there is a Chida Akasha. Chid Akasha. Chid means consciousness. The space of consciousness. Consciousness itself is considered a space, and this consciousness space is so commonly used in Vedanta, in ordinary parlance, in poetry, in literature, everywhere in India. There's a place in the southern part of India in Tamil Nadu called Chidambaram. It's a place of pilgrimage. Ambara means Akasha. Chidambaram means Chid Akasha, where the Supreme Being, Shiva, is supposed to be present in the form of the element Akasha. As you know, 5 elements, Prithvi, Marut, Teja, Up and Akasha. So there's a funny story. Chidambara Rahasyam, that means the secret of Chidambara. You have to pay 5 rupees or 10 rupees. Now it will be more. So if you want to know Chidambara Rahasyam, come on, assemble here, purchase a ticket for so much money. So a large number of people assemble. Then there's a screen on the stage. Now see the Chidambara Rahasyam. And the screen is removed. There is nothing there. Now go, over. I also went long ago when I was a child. Said, what is the Chidambara? I said, nothing. That is Chidambara Rahasyam. Chidakasha. So Chidakasha is the space of consciousness, which is Brahman, which is Atman. So the word which is used in Vedanta is Daharakasha, Hridakasha, Hridaya Akasha, Yesho Ontar Hridaya Akasha, Tasminnayam Purusho Manomaya, Amrito Hiranmaya, Taittiriya Upanishad. Hridaya Akasha. This is the space in the heart. Chidakasa is space of consciousness. And the same idea occurs in almost all religions in the world, mystic experiences of all the religions people. The Tantra calls it Hrid Chakra, Anahata. It's a 12-petaled lotus. Vedanta calls it Hridaya Akasha. Tantra calls it Hrid Chakra. There's a chakra in the heart, which is 12-petaled lotus, corresponding to the middle portion here. And the Vishnu and the Narayana Suktam describes it by saying, this much size if you take, Adho nishtya vitastyante nabhyam uparitishtati. So if you take this portion, they used to measure in those days with this. This much, this much, this much. They used to call it 1 foot, 1 yard, and so on. So you take Nishtya, you take this Adam's apple here, the throat. From here, you measure this much. And so much above your navel. So this much below your throat and this much just above your navel, that is the location of the heart. This is what the Narayana Suktam says. Adho nishtya vitastyante nabhyam uparitishtati jwalamala kulam bhati vishvasyayatanam mahat. Vishvasya ayatanam mahat. This huge space of the entire world is contained in this space. This is not a mere story, this is a realization. Professor Aranyaka is going to explain this now logically and rationally. So it's called the Hridaya Akasha, Hridakasha in Vedanta, Hrid Chakra in Tantra, and is called in yoga, it's called Hridaya Pragya, the Pragya which is in the heart, the light of Pragya, Ritambhara Pragya, Pragya Aloka. This Pragya is the awakening of the higher consciousness which reveals the location of the spiritual heart. Pragya is the word which is used in the Yoga Sutra. Medha is the word used in the Vedas and Medha Suktam. Dhi is the word which is used in Gayatri Mantra. They mean the same thing. Medha, Pragya, Dhi, Buddhi Guha, the word is also used. Buddhi is not the ordinary intellect. It is a higher intuitive intelligence. The higher intuitive intelligence is called the Dhi or a Medha. And this higher intuitive intelligence is responsible for revealing the secrets of spiritual truths. The secrets of spiritual truths are revealed to you in a flash by the higher intelligence, by prajna, by medha. Medha Devi Jushamana na agaat Vishwachi Bhadra Sumanasyamana Tvaya Jushta Rishir Bhavati Devi. Who is a Rishi? A Rishi is a person in whom this higher intuitive intelligence and awareness, Dhi, Prajna, Hridaya Guha, the light of consciousness within, Hrit Padma has been opened. Figuratively, poetically, it is said, Sri Ramakrishna also described it, the lotus is actually drooping down like this, and when the light of intelligence touches it, it goes up and then flowers. Full bloomed lotus. These are experiences, mystic experience of great rishis. So you see the light of consciousness within, and tremendous light comes to you. Light means knowledge. Everything is revealed in a trice. Just like the entire hall, the room is dark, and you put on the switch, in a trice, the whole thing is revealed. So when the light of consciousness awakens within you, everything is absolutely clear. You can understand the higher spiritual truths in a trice. You become a rishi. That is a challenge which the rishis gave. You also can become a rishi now here. Anybody, anytime, anywhere can aspire to rishihood. It is not the rishis were there earlier, they can't be now. Christian mystics have called this the heart, the spiritual heart. The early fathers of Philokalia, there's a famous book, recording the experience of the contemplative, desert fathers. And there is a very interesting book called The Way of the Pilgrim, in which this pilgrim was inquiring into the meaning of St. Paul's statement in his epistle, pray without ceasing. Non-stop you should pray. Then he could not understand how is it possible for a person to pray without stopping. He has to eat, he has to sleep, he has to do so many things. Then the teaching was given to him. It is not that he prays consciously. Prayer, as it were, wells up from his spiritual heart, unconsciously, superconsciously, constantly welling up. This is called in Tantra Shastra and Mantra Shastra as Ajapa Japa. Most of these ideas are very common to all the religions. Sufi mystics also experience this light in the heart. Light in the heart is a common experience of all the mystics, with which spiritual life just begins. Ajapa Japa means you are doing japa without doing japa. Japa is not being done by you, but japa is going on. Just like I'm breathing while talking to you, I'm not conscious I'm breathing. My food is getting digested in my stomach without my being aware of it. You don't eat a big feast and then go to your office and say, sir, I want one whole day casual leave to be able to digest my food. Nobody says that. Your food gets digested. You don't digest your food gets automatically digested. In exactly the same way, japa is going on. Awareness is going on. The higher awareness is constantly shining, and this light never goes out. The Brihadaranyaka talks about this. Antarjyoti, the light vision, never goes out. Na viparilopo vidyate avinashitvat. Now, Viparilopo, it doesn't go otherwise. There is no power cut in the higher consciousness. One of our Swamis wrote a beautiful poem, The Midnight Sun. It is as if the sun has risen in midnight. You feel the luminous light of consciousness constantly. Whether you are sitting or sleeping, waking or dreaming, constantly it is being done. Katama atmeti yoyam vijnanamaya praneshu hridyantarjyotif purushas sasamanas sannubho lokavanu sancharati dhyayateva leelayateva se swapno bhutvevam lokamati kramati mrityorupani. Dhyayati iva lelayati iva. So iva is a favorite phrase of Shankara, as you know. If you want to describe Advaita Vedanta, it's just one small word consisting of just two letters. It will be iva, as if, as it were. Dhyayati iva, this consciousness, as it were, it is meditating. It is as if meditating, as if it is moving and shaking, but it just does nothing. It is just there. It is a presence. Now, it is moving, lokau anusancharati. It is moving from this world to the next world. And identified with the Vijnanamaya. Advaita Vedanta calls it Upadhi. Upadhi means that which is covered. The self which is self-luminous. Why is it called self-luminous? There is no other light necessary to illuminate. Suppose something is dark, then you bring external light to illumine the whole place. How do you illumine the Atman? The Atman is self-luminous, and therefore it does not require any other light to illuminate it. Because it is all the time shining, it is the very nature of light of consciousness. Don't confuse it with ordinary light. This is a supreme light, and it's expressed in so many words. Because when you say Jyoti or light, we understand the ordinary light of the sun or the moon. So he says it is the light of lights, Jyotisham Jyoti. Tat Shubhram Jyotisham Jyoti Tadyad Atmavido Viduhu Mundakopanishad. That is Shubhram, that is the pure Jyotisham Jyoti, light of lights. And that is understood by a person who is self-realized. Swami Vivekananda, in the famous Aratrika hymn to Ramakrishna, his divine guru, said, Jyotira Jyoti Ujjvala Hridi Kandara Tumi Tama Bhanjanahar. Tumi Tama Bhanjanahar, O Lord, you are the destroyer of all darkness of ignorance. Who are you? Jyotira Jyoti. Jyotisham Jyoti. You are the light of all lights. What does it mean? That means ordinary lights in the world have to receive their illumination from the supreme light of consciousness to be able to become luminous. Just like the moon is not self-luminous, it is a borrowed light from the sun. Exactly the same way, when that supreme consciousness shines, everything else shines after it. Na tatra suryo bhati, na chandra tarakam noma vidyuto bhanti, kuto yamagnihi, tameva bhantam anubhati sarvam, tasya bhasa sarvamidam vibhati. There the sun shines not, nor the moon. There the stars don't shine. He shining, everything else shines. By his light, the light of the Supreme Consciousness, the entire universe gets illuminated, becomes luminous. These are great truths in the Upanishad. Natatra suryo bhatina chandra tarakam nema vidyuto bhanti kutoyam agni tameva bantam anubhati sarvam tasya bhasa sarvamidam vibhati. This occurs in the Mundaka Upanishad as well as in the Katha Upanishad. So it wanders between two worlds. Shankara's commentary, that is to say, between this world and the next. The self transmigrates by successively discarding the body and the organs already possessed, taking new ones, hundreds of them, in an unbroken series. The transmigration of the self is attributable to its identification with name and form created by ignorance, avidya. It is not the natural state of the self. According to Vedanta, the self reflected in the buddhi, the intellect, is called the jiva, the phenomenal being which is subjected to birth and death. This is Vedanta's famous doctrine. Who is it that transmigrates? You say you go from one life to another life, and the body, physical body falls. The Hindus believe that you take another body. Who is the transfer? Jivatma. Jivatma, with all the impressions of your previous life, it goes to the next body. Who is this jiva? It's called Vyavaharika jiva, phenomenal self. Who is this jiva? He is the Vijnanamaya, the supreme self conditioned upadhi, upahita by the Vijnanamaya. The reflection of the supreme light of consciousness, the Jyotisham Jyoti, in the pure Antakarana, the inner organ of the mind, Vishuddha Antakarana, Vishuddha Chitta. This reflection is what is called the phenomenal jiva or the jivatma, Vyavaharika jiva. This is the Vijnanamaya which is being spoken of here in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Yoyam Vijnanamaya pranesho hridi antarjyoti. So this is the Vijnanamaya Atman, which is a phenomenal self. Lokavana sancharati, moves from one world to another world and is identified with dreams. It transcends this waking world and represents the forms of death. What is identified with dreams? Explanation. How are we to know that the self moves between two worlds and performs other activities on account of its assuming the likeness of the Vijnanamaya? This question is answered by saying, this Atman seems to become whatever the intellect which it resembles becomes. Therefore, when the intellect, Vijnanamaya, assumes modifications called a dream, the self also assumes the modification of the dream. When the intellect awakes, the self also awakes. Waking, dreaming, deep sleep are three different modifications of the intellect. The light of the self makes the modifications possible. This is a very, very interesting statement. The beauty of this Brihadaranyaka Upanishad is that rationally trying to understand the great truths of Vedanta. How do you know there is an inner light? Is it imagination? Or is it that you have to believe what the Upanishad says? Or belief in the experience of people who have realized? No. What is the light by which you see dreams? Simple question. All of us see dreams being described here in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. There he becomes Swayam Jyoti. Swayam Vihatya, Swayam Nirmaya, Svena Bhasa, Svena Jyotisha, Prasvapit Tatrayam Purusha Swayam Jyotir Bhavati. He becomes Swayam Jyoti. He is his own Jyoti. He is the light himself. And he constructs so many things. Na tatra rathana rathayogana panthano bhavantyatha rathan rathayogan patasrijate. There is no roads, no ways, no chariots, no cars. There he creates chariots and cars and roads. Na tatrananda mudaf pramudo bhavantyatanandan mudaf pramudasrijate. There is no ananda, muda or pramoda, enjoyment, picnics and going around. There he creates all this. Na tatra veshanta pushkaranya sravantyo bhavantyatha veshanta pushkarani sravanti srijate saikarta. So he becomes a creator there. Look at this language of the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Sahi karta srijate. He creates huge castles and cars and lakes and swimming pools. And he creates all of them. Out of what? He creates all these out of himself. Remember this. There's nothing outside. Just carefully analyze your dream. This is a very scientific investigation. Do not say that I'm not interested in investigating, because you have to be interested. If you are interested in your own self, which everybody is supposed to be, you have to investigate into the nature of your own self. Yourself now in waking state moves around, talks, sees, touches, eats, enjoys. You become tired and go to sleep. And you dream. You create roads where there are no roads, create cars where there are no cars. You create swimming pools and castles and mansions and enjoy things which are not there. Who does it? I. Out of what? Out of myself. And how do I see all this in dream? By the light of the Atman. There is no external light. The simple challenge which the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad gives to you is that what is the light by which you see dreams? The light by which you see dreams is the inner light of consciousness. And the light of the Atman is actually experience. It is not a story. It is not a theory. It is not philosophy. It is not metaphysics. It is not religion. It is not theology. It is just a matter of your daily experience that I see the light within. I ask any of these so-called rationalists and so-called scientists who will say, I don't believe in the Atman. Come on, sir, you tell me how you saw dreams last time when you slept. What is the light? You may say, I'm not interested in this, but you have to be interested. The Upanishad says, if you are not interested in that which is your most beloved and the dearest and the nearest and the most intimate, which is the I, then you are an animal. Who is the person who is not interested in his own self? An animal? A rational thinking human being will be interested in that which is dearest and the most beloved of him or her, which is the I. So I ask and wonder, how do I that I see? So many dreams. Sahi Karta. Look at this. He is the Karta. This is 4.3.10. Chaturtodhyaya, Tritiya Brahmana, Dasham Mantra. Sahi Karta. You become the creator while you are dreaming. Remember this. What does it mean? That means you create objects from out of your own consciousness and see those objects, interact with those objects in dream by the light of your own consciousness, Chaitanya Jyoti. Isn't it wonderful? Which means consciousness has the capacity to divide itself into a subject and an object. I repeat this sentence again. Consciousness has the capacity to divide itself into a subject and the object. That means you become a creator God. And we're completely identified in Sushupti, deep sleep, no externals, no duality, no relativity. Purely you are aware of your bliss. You become God Himself. Esha Sarveshwara, Esha Sarvagya. Mandukya Upanishad. So the Upanishad simply drives you deep within to discover. You don't have to go to temples and mosques and churches and read books to find out. You open the book of your own inner consciousness, the self. Study it, deeply go into it. For thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of the best brains have been devoting all their lives investigating into the mystery of consciousness. What is this consciousness? Now neuroscience is coming back again. Scientists are trying to make experiments very weakly and meekly, but they should be humble enough to say that we don't understand. What are the changes which take place in the brain and the body? That's also physical. What is the mystery of consciousness? So we become creators in dream. Srijate sai karta. So he becomes Hiranmaya Purusha Ekahamsaha. He is the Hiranmaya Purusha. Hiranmaya is the word used in the Upanishads very often, which is called golden. Golden does not mean any color. It is consciousness. It is a description of Hiranyagarbha in the Chandogya Upanishad 1.6.6. 166. Yayeshontaraditye Hiranmaya Purusho Drishyate. This Hiranmaya Purusha, the golden being, is seen in the orb of the sun, Aditya. Who is he? Hiranyashmashru, Hiranyakesha, Apranakhat, Sarvayeva Suvarna. All his hair is also golden. His beard is also golden. Shankara says in the Bhashya, why is it mentioned that way? People may think he may be golden, but his hair should be black. His beard should be either black or white and so on. Here explains, so Hiranya Shabdaha Jyotirmaya Ityarthaha. The word Hiranya means Jyotirmaya. Means he is Jyotish. The idea of the Jyoti is everywhere in the Upanishads and the Gita and in Christian parlance also. There's a wonderful book by Evelyn Underhill. It's a very old book, Mysticism, where repeatedly is mentioned the light in the heart, the mysterious light in the heart, the uncreated light. This uncreated light is the experience of all the mystics of all religions. This is Jyotirmaya. And Jyotirmayan Mayani eva Shmashruni Keshascha ityartha. Apranakad Pranakha Nakhagram Nakhagrena saha Sarvaha Suvarna eva Bharupa ityartha. This is Shankara's Bhashya on 1.6.6 Chandogya. Apranakhat Sarva eva Suvarnaha Bharupaha, the light of consciousness. So these are words which are commonly used and described. So in dream experience, we clearly see that there is an inner light which you can't refute. Because in dream you see in that light, you move in that light, you create objects from out of your own consciousness. You become a creator, sahikarta, and consciousness having the capacity to divide itself into a subject and object. It moves around in dreams. And therefore, to crack the mystery of creation, our ancient rishis projected from the microcosm to the macrocosm. This is a very huge subject which we'll discuss sometime. Just like the individual dreams and creates objects, dividing his consciousness into the created and the created, in exactly the same way, if we project from the individual to the macrocosm, the Paramapurusha, the Supreme Purusha, in his dream, the entire universe is created. We are the dream objects of the dream of the Supreme Purusha. That's why in the Hindu mythology, Vishnu is always symbolized as sleeping. It's called Shayana, lying down. Ananta Shayana, never-ending sleep. Is always sleeping like this. That means in his dream is projecting the whole universe. Just like I, in my individual dream, is able to project so many objects, the Supreme Lord Vishnu is creating the universe as it were through his dream. And the dream of the Supreme Being is his entire universe, including you and me. Just like my dream object does not know me as the dreamer, we do not know the Supreme Being as the dreamer. So the entire world is called Swapna, Swapnavat, the dream. It is not the dream of the individual. When we say, Vedanta says the world is a dream, Vedanta is like a dream, not your dream and my dream, but the dream of Hiranyagarbha, the dream of the Supreme Lord. And when he goes into Sushupti, the dream ends and this Mahapralaya. When he wakes up again, starts dreaming, again the world is created. So how they have projected from the individual to the cosmic, the microcosm to the macrocosm. Because we do not know the secret of creation, which is vast and macrocosmic. But we do have some experience of the individual, the microcosmic. And there's a principle in science which is called the projection principle. From the microcosmic, project onto the macrocosmic, where the principle is the same, and understand creation as the dream of the cosmic person, the Hiranyagarbha, just like your individual dream has produced all these various objects out of your own consciousness, which has the capacity to divide itself in the subject and the object in the inner light of consciousness. Svena bhasa, svena jyotisha, swayam jyotirubhavati, srijate sahi karta. Just like you see this in your dream, he is creating the whole universe. These are great cosmic mysteries which our ancients have tried to crack very scientifically through the individual experience, the microcosmic experience, through the projection principle, projecting onto the macrocosm and trying to create a model. These are various models. Just like science creates so many models for creation, nothing is clear. Nobody knows for sure how this happened. So we have also created some wonderful models. So the Brihadaranyaka text, I just get to give a glimpse of this in the 4th chapter, 3rd Brahmana, 3rd section. It's a remarkable Jyotir Brahmana. There's a huge discussion. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnad Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Thank you, Maharaj, for your illuminating discourse. Tomorrow, this recording of this lecture will be broadcast for all who are unable to attend this lecture live at 5 p.m. So with the permission of Maharaj, I conclude this session right